Welcome to the Deep Dive, where we sift through the information to give you the clearest insights ever. Ever wonder about that unseen world inside us? Or maybe felt a bit, uneasy about food or water safety, especially when you're traveling. Today, we're taking a really fascinating plunge into the world of opportunistic intestinal protozoa. Sounds a bit technical, I know, but trust me, it's pretty interesting stuff.
It really is. And our mission today is basically to unpack these tiny, single-celled organisms. We want to get a handle on what they are, how they actually infect us, and, crucially, why they become such a problem, particularly for people whose immune systems aren't working at full strength. We'll look at their, unique features, how they spread, and what we can actually do about them, all based on the sources we've dug into.
Okay, and that word opportunistic, that sounds really important here. What does that actually mean in this context?
Yeah, it's fundamental. It means their power to cause serious disease, their pathogenicity. It really only shows up fully when someone's immune system is weakened, suppressed. So for someone with a healthy immune system, an immunocompetent person, an infection might be super mild, maybe no symptoms at all, right? It often just clears up on its own.
Okay.
But for someone who is immunodepressed, these same infections can become incredibly severe, chronic, even life-threatening, often causing just awful, relentless diarrhea.
That distinction changes everything, doesn't it? So who are the main players we're going to be diving into today, these microscopic troublemakers?
Well, we're focusing on two main groups. First, there are the Apocomplexa. That group includes some names you might have heard of, like Cryptosporidium, Cystoisospora belli, Cyclospora cayetanensis, and also Sarcocystis. And then the second part of our dive will be into Blastocystis. That one's pretty widespread, but its story is a bit more, well, debated.
Interesting. Okay, let's start with the Autocomplexa then. You said they're masters of entry. What's their secret? How do they get in?
Right. What's really fascinating is their shared feature, something called an apical complex. You can sort of picture it like a specialized toolkit right at the front end of the parasite when it's in its infective stage.
The toolkit.
Yeah, kind of like a microscopic drill or maybe a stealth entry device. It's packed with enzymes and proteins that let the parasite literally penetrate and invade our own cells. It's incredibly efficient.
Wow, built-in invasion kit. That's something else. So once they're inside our cells, how do they, live,
Right.
reproduce? Do they just clone themselves over and over?
They're pretty clever, actually. They typically have two main reproductive strategies. There's an asexual phase, kind of like rapid cloning, yeah.
Yeah.
Building up numbers quickly inside the host, schizogony, technically. But then there's also a sexual phase, gamogony, leading to the formation of often very resilient forms like oocysts, which are designed to survive outside the host and spread the infection. It's a sort of 1-2 punch for survival and transmission.
And do these cycles always happen in just one host, or do some need to move between different animals or people?
That varies, actually. Some, like Cryptosporidium, which we'll get to, are monoxene. They do everything in one single host, start to finish. Others are more complex. They might need 2 different hosts, that's dixene, or even multiple hosts, heteroxene, to complete their full life cycle. Maybe an animal first, then a human. This difference is key to how they spread.
Okay, that makes sense. Let's kick off the specific spotlight with Cryptosporidium. You hear that name a lot. What's the deal with the cypripede part, and which ones are the main troublemakers for humans?
Right, cypripede just means species, plural. Basically, there's more than one species in the Cryptosporidium genus. And yeah, you're right. Cryptosporidium parvum and Cryptosporidium hominis, those two account for over 90% of human infections. The key form here, the one that makes you sick and spreads it, is the oocyst. It's tiny, only 4 to 6 micrometers across, round or oval, and it's incredibly tough. Inside, it holds 4 sporozoites ready to infect. And here's a really crucial point. These oocysts are immediately infectious the moment they're shed in feces. No waiting period needed.
Immediately infectious.
Wow. So that sounds like a pretty direct line to infection then. How does that usually happen?
Exactly. Transmission is mostly oral. You swallow these infectious oocysts. That's why it's often called a fecal peril disease. It's all about fecal contamination. And the routes can be quite varied. Human to human is common, in places like daycares, healthcare settings, or even through certain sexual practices involving anal-oral contact. Then there's zoonotic animal to human. Think farmers, vets, people working closely with livestock.
Okay.
And get this, Autoinfestation is also possible. An infected person can actually reinfect themselves through the fecal-oral route if hygiene isn't perfect.
Autoinfestation.
Yeah.
That is another layer. And I guess contaminated water must be a huge factor here, too.
Absolutely huge. The sources really stress contaminated water, often linked to big outbreaks. But contaminated food is also a major route, anything soiled by feces, basically. And Cryptosporidium is found everywhere. It's cosmopolitan, pops up sporadically, or causes these larger epidemics. It's a persistent global challenge. So if someone does get infected, what does it actually look like? You mentioned that difference between healthy people and those with weaker immune systems.
Yeah, the contrast is really stark. It perfectly illustrates that opportunistic nature. For someone immunocompromised, it's often devastating. We're talking profound, watery, nonstop, non-bloody diarrhea. This leads to severe malabsorption, dehydration. It can even spread outside the gut, the biliary system, sometimes the lungs. And tragically, without treatment, it can be fatal.
Wow. And for someone healthy.
Completely different picture, usually. Often it's asymptomatic, they don't even know they have it, or maybe mild watery diarrhea, perhaps a low fever, some stomach cramps, nausea, but it typically resolves on its own in, say, 10 to 15 days, self-limiting.
Okay, quite a difference. How do doctors actually diagnose this? Spotting something so tiny must be tricky, especially with such varied symptoms.
It is tricky. The main way is looking for the oocysts directly in a stool sample. They use special staining techniques, like the modified Ziehl-Neelsen stain. It makes the oocysts stand out. They often look bright fuchsia pink. That's considered the reference method. Other methods exist too, like immunofluorescence, where they glow apple green, or ELISA tests, and even PCR, looking for the parasite's DNA.
And blood tests. Do they help?
That's a critical point. For crypto, serology testing blood for antibodies is not useful for diagnosing an active infection. You have to find the actual parasite or its components in the stool. Direct detection is key.
Right, direct detection. Got it. Now, the big question. Treatment. Is there a magic bullet for Cryptosporidium?
Unfortunately, no. This is a major challenge. Our sources are clear. There is no curative drug that reliably wipes out Cryptosporidium, and no treatment is considered totally effective against the oocysts. Drugs like nitazoxanide or paromomycin might help. They can sometimes reduce how long the symptoms last, offer some partial activity, but they often don't fully eradicate the parasite.
So relapses are possible.
Very common, sadly, especially in immunodepressed patients. It underscores how difficult these infections can be to manage long-term.
That's pretty sobering. Okay, so if crypto is the immediate, directly infectious one, what about Cystoisospora cayetanensis? What makes it different?
Right, Cystoisospora has a fascinating difference. Its oocysts are not immediately infectious when shed. They have to spend time sporulating, maturing in the outside environment first, and they need specific conditions for this warm, humid weather, think 20 to 40 degrees Celsius, for several days. Only then do they become infectious.
So that waiting period changes things.
Completely. It means autoinfestation, reinfecting yourself directly, is impossible with Cystoisospora. You can't get it straight from another person either, not immediately. It needs that environmental step.
Which likely explains why it's often linked to travel, right? Environmental exposure.
Exactly. Spread happens when you ingest these mature, sporulated oocysts, usually in contaminated water or food from areas where it's endemic, tropical, subtropical places, the Americas, Asia, Africa. Clinically, for healthy travelers, it's a very common cause of traveler's diarrhea or tourista. Usually lasts maybe 2 to 6 weeks, then clears up. But again, for immunodepressed individuals, it means intense, chronic, watery diarrhea.
And spotting this one in the lab? Similar techniques.
Similar, but with some distinctions. The modified Ziehl-Neelsen stain works, but the oocysts often look red against a green background. Phenosafranin makes them look yellow-orange. And interestingly, they autofluoresce blue under UV light. Molecular methods, PCR, are also used.
Okay. And treatment. Are we better off here than with crypto?
Yes, thankfully. For Cystoisospora, there's a good first-line treatment. Trimethoprim sulfamethoxazole, you probably know it as Bactrim or cotrimoxazole. It's generally quite effective.
That's definitely better news.
Okay.
Okay, next on the list was Cystoisospora belli. I think you mentioned something unique about its host.
Yes, Cystoisospora used to be called Isospora, has a very specific preference. Humans are its only known host.
Only humans, so no animal reservoir we know of.
Nope. Which is interesting. And like Cystoisospora, its transmission relies on ingesting oocysts that have sporulated outside the body in the environment. So, again, contaminated food and water are the routes. And because sporulation happens externally, same story. No autoinfestation possible.
Okay, and clinically, What does Cystoisospora infection look like, and how's the treatment?
For immunodepressed patients, it typically causes a severe diarrheal syndrome. And a really significant issue here is the high rate of relapses even after treatment. It can be hard to keep it suppressed. In immunocompetent people, it might be asymptomatic or cause some inconsistent watery diarrhea, not usually as severe.
And treatment is Bactrim again.
Yes, cotrimoxazole Bactrim is the main treatment. But as I said, that high relapse rate in immunodepressed individuals is a real challenge.
Got it. Okay, the last of the epicomplex that you mentioned was Sarcocystis. This one sounded like it had a more complicated life cycle involving animals.
That's right. Sarcocystis plays a two-host game. It's Dixane. It needs two different types of hosts to complete its life cycle. There's an intermediate host, usually a herbivore like cattle or pigs, where asexual reproduction happens. Lots of multiplication. Then there's a definitive host, typically a carnivore, and that includes us, humans, where the sexual reproduction part of the cycle takes place.
So if we're the definitive host, how do we get infected? Not from another person directly, then?
No, not directly person to person. Humans get infected by eating raw or undercooked meat, specifically beef or pork, that contains cysts filled with the infective stage called bradyzotes. So it's directly linked to eating contaminated meat.
Undercooked meat. Okay, and the clinical side. Is it just diarrhea, or is there something else going on with Sarcocystis, especially for vulnerable people?
Well, in healthy people, it's often asymptomatic. But in immunodepressed individuals, it can cause something quite immediate and dramatic. A toxic infectious syndrome.
Toxic, like the parasite releases a toxin.
Exactly. It seems linked to a specific toxin called sarcocystine. This can cause pretty severe symptoms like diarrhea and vomiting almost right away, even before the parasite fully establishes its reproductive cycle. It's quite distinct.
Wow, a toxin effect. That's different. And treatment. Back to Bactrim.
Yes. Cotrimoxazole, or Bactrim, is the standard treatment used for Sarcocystis infections as well.
Okay, that covers the epicomplexa group. Now, let's switch over to blastocystis. You mentioned this one is kind of debated. What's the story there?
Yeah, blastocystis is really common. It's a protozoan found in the human gut and also in lots of mammals and birds. It's actually one of the most frequently identified parasites in human stool samples worldwide. Super common. But, and this is the big but, its actual role in causing disease, its pathogenicity, is still actively debated. Just because it's there doesn't always mean it's causing the symptoms someone might be having. It's complicated.
So it's everywhere, but maybe not always the bad guy. And you said it doesn't really have species in the usual sense?
Right. Instead of clearly defined species, researchers talk about different genetic subtypes. There are at least 17 identified subtypes, ST1, ST2, etc. This genetic diversity might play a role in why its effects seem variable. It's also a bit of a shapeshifter morphologically. It can exist in different forms. The most common one you see in fresh stool samples is the vacuolar form, has a big central bubble or vacuole, but the really important one for spreading is the cystic form. It's much smaller, 2 to 5 micrometers, has a thick protective wall. This is the form that can survive outside the body and transmit the infection. It's the resistance and dissemination stage.
And who carries it? Just humans?
No, it has a wide range of reservoirs, humans definitely, but also birds, reptiles, lots of different mammals. Transmission happens when you ingest that tough cystic form, usually through contaminated water or food. So it's often considered a waterborne illness.
And like crypto, can you get it from people or animals or reinfect yourself?
Yes, all those routes seem possible with blastocystis too. Autoinfestation, person-to-person anthropootic, and animal-to-human zoonotic.
Okay, so given the debate about whether it's always harmful, what kind of symptoms can it cause?
Well, in immunocompromised people, it can definitely be associated with watery diarrhea, which might be severe or prolonged. In immunocompetent people, the picture is broader and sometimes less clear. It can be linked to mild or moderate diarrhea, abdominal pain, nausea. But interestingly, it's also sometimes associated with symptoms outside the gut, like urticaria, that's hives, or general itching, pruritus. And some studies suggest a possible link with irritable bowel syndrome, IBS. This wide range of potential symptoms adds to the complexity of figuring out its exact role.
Hives and itching. From a gut parasite, that's surprising. And how is it treated if symptoms are attributed to it?
The approach depends on the patient's immune status. For immunocompetent people who are symptomatic, the drug metronidazole is often used. For immunodepressed patients experiencing symptoms linked to blastocystis, the go-to treatment is usually Bactrim or cotrimoxazole.
Right. Okay, this has been a really thorough tour of these opportunistic protozoa. Fascinating and a bit scary. So bringing it all together,
Yeah.
what's the big takeaway for us, for the listeners, or a common thread here?
There absolutely is. If you look at most of these parasites we've discussed, the common denominator is how they spread. They are overwhelmingly fecal peril diseases,
Fecal peril, meaning
meaning the primary route of infection involves contamination with fecal matter. It sounds unpleasant, but that's the reality. It's about managing that risk.
which leads straight to prevention. If fecal contamination is the main issue, how do we actually protect ourselves from these microscopic threats?
Well, the sources we looked at are pretty unanimous on this. The single most effective weapon we have is sanitary education and basic hygiene practices. It sounds simple, but it's critical.
So it really comes down to the basics, washing hands and things like that.
Absolutely. It starts there. Consistent, thorough hand washing, especially after using the toilet, changing diapers, and before handling or eating food. That's fundamental. But it extends beyond personal hygiene. On a community level, things like proper sanitation, good latrines, sewage treatment are vital. Regulating the use of human or animal manure as fertilizer is also important. And protecting water sources is key. Systematic wastewater treatment to prevent contamination of drinking water supplies and natural water bodies.
Makes sense. And what about for people traveling to areas where these parasites are more common? Any specific advice?
Definitely. The standard advice is crucial. Drink only bottled water or water that's been boiled or properly treated. Avoid ice unless you know it's made from safe water. Be careful with food. Avoid raw or unpeeled fruits and vegetables unless you peel them yourself. Make sure cooked food, especially vegetables, is served piping hot.
And for Sarcocystis specifically, the meat one.
Right. For that one, the key is simply ensuring beef and pork are cooked thoroughly all the way through. That kills the cysts in the muscle tissue.
Okay, that's really practical advice. So let's just quickly summarize the core idea one last time. We're talking about tiny, often intracellular parasites. Opportunistic.
Exactly. Their defining feature is causing severe, sometimes chronic gut infections, mainly diarrhea, leading to dehydration, potentially worse specifically when the host's immune system is weakened.
And treatment-wise, Bactrim is common for many in immunodepressed people, but not a cure-all, especially for crypto.
Correct. For Cryptosporidium, there's no magic bullet that completely eradicates it, which really emphasizes why prevention is so incredibly important.
So what does this all mean for you listening? Well, the science is intricate, sure, but the main message is actually quite empowering, isn't it?
It is. It means that fundamental hygiene, being careful about your food and water, especially when traveling, these simple actions, are genuinely your most powerful defenses against these invisible invaders. It's about turning this knowledge into practical, health-protecting habits.
This gives you a sense of control.
Definitely. And, this whole discussion really makes you think about that constant invisible interaction between our own bodies, our internal health, and the environment around us, doesn't it? How might thinking about these tiny opportunists change how you view your daily habits? Or even how you think about bigger issues, like global health efforts focused on clean water and sanitation? What role do our individual choices really play in this whole ecosystem of health, connecting us all through something as basic as water, something to think about?